into the book of Joshua. I'll do a quick little plug and then just let you guys know. I don't know if you've been seeing, but here, these are little, just singular books of the Bible. This is the ESV version, which is what I use in my study and what's in your notes. I use this, and then here's this little thing, and it tells you if you want your own little copy, they're $6. We're going to have a whole stack of them, about 10 of them here next week. So if you're interested, please pick up a copy then and do that. Don't be like Yvonne, who tried to steal my copy. She didn't know, though. It wasn't marked. But yeah, Joshua's going to be, what's that? Okay, already getting sass. Joshua, though, next week, it's going to be just a good time. I love the study in Joshua. And then from there, we'll go right into Judges, and we'll learn about this ancient history for the Israelites and what they look like as they established themselves as a kingdom. What did they look like in these days when they were still just kind of a band, a tribe, and not really this nation? What did they look like? They were a bunch of ruffians is what it was. But before they were ruffians, they had really good leaders, and Joshua is one of them. He was one of their great leaders, and he was the predecessor to Moses. And so he was one of the 12 spies. Him and Caleb came back with a favorable report and said, we can take this land. And so we'll read, what does the book of the Bible look like in this history from one of those very kind of an optimist, right, who believes God can do anything. We just need to make sure we're following God. So what does that look like? And Joshua's going to take us through that. I'm excited about doing that. But tonight we're going to wrap up John chapter 21. Let's start with prayer and we'll get right into it, okay? Heavenly Father, we just ask that you would be with us. Lord, it is with pause. It's with purpose and intention and honor that we open up your word, that we study this message that you've given us, this window into your heart, Lord. I pray that you would help us to just open our minds and our hearts tonight, that we would receive that which you would share with us tonight. Bless us in the reading of your word, we pray. Amen. Okay, so this is we think of this as like the sign-off or the postscript of John, and we're seeing another resurrection appearance is happening still here. As we go, we need to know this. This is not a pick on John Sisler night, okay? It would be easy for us all to do that right now because you're going to read these commentary notes, and they're going to keep speaking about this fact, this idea that Jesus is hard to recognize for people, that he has somehow changed. And why is that important that to us that he does appear changed? And from what we reading Revelation, if we're to read Revelation in its context, we understand that he is forever changed in this appearance. I know some of you guys, when we left last study, some of you guys dove right in and were starting to look and see, right? I'm thinking of Deanne. Deanne was one of those. She immediately started plugging in. She went to Bible Hub and she was like, why did Jesus still have the scars, right? Right. You did that here? The night of? During the study? Okay. All right. So you guys, if you have questions about that, go to Deanne. She'll field them. Okay? All right. We are in chapter 21, verse 1. Jesus appears to the 7 disciples. It's interesting when we get here, because as we get into this, you kind of wonder, what do you do as a follower of Christ? What would you do if you were in this situation, in this circumstance of seeing your rabbi, your master and Lord, treated this way, having submitted himself and suffered the agony that he did, and ultimately dying this criminal's death, right? This was a humiliating death. You think he was this rabbi who was just a week before being lauded as with hallelujahs and hosannas, right? And then he's next, it doesn't take but 7 days later, and he's hanging between two thieves on a cross. What would you do if that was your leader, if that was the person that you abandoned everything in your life to follow? What would you do after that? And that's the position we're in right now in John 21, and we're seeing what the disciples are actually doing. So let's get into it. After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he revealed himself in this way. So we're getting that. We get into this, and I always pointed out how many times that John uses this after this metatauta phrase in Greek. But we're seeing something prophetic happening here because Jesus is revealing himself, and that's what our ESV translation says. But other translations can use that word and use a different word in that situation. How many of you guys in verse 1, it does not say revealed, but it uses another word about what Jesus is doing? Sue, what does yours say? He what? He showed. Okay, yeah, he showed. Anybody else have anything different in your translations? What's that? Just afterward? He what, Cheryl? So he appeared. Okay, he showed, he appeared. But what we're getting in here is this word in the Greek. What it's really telling us is that he is saying he revealed himself. And it's this Greek word, and I got it. I usually struggle with this word, and so I had to do the phonetic pronunciation. Ephanerosin. Ephanerosin. It's the first aorist active indicative. I don't expect any of us to remember those terms here. But what it's telling us is that not only did Jesus show himself or reveal or appear to the disciples, but it was more than that. He was revealing himself. And in showing himself, in appearing to them, they were taking on understanding at that time that they had not had before. Okay? So this is much more than just simply showing up or appearing. This is a manifestation of all of his teaching and everything that he's been through with them. This is his early life as accounted for. We see that in John chapter 1, verse 31 and 2:11. We're seeing all the works that he does. Ultimately, his lessons that we hear about, the disciples hear about his second coming and him in glory, they're starting to understand all of these things now. They're becoming reality to them. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, or Didymus, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee. Who are the sons of Zebedee? James and John? Is that what I heard? Rochelle, is that what you said? That was what your mom said. Okay, yes. James and John, good job. And then two unidentified people in there, right? If we accounted for 5. But we can kind of logically suppose that where there is one, there is another in these accounts. And so if you look at that, if Nathanael's being accounted somewhere, then we need to probably guess and suppose that Philip is probably with him, because those two are often together. They're combined, or they're ministry partners. You see them traveling together, as you do see Andrew often traveling with his brother Peter. Okay? So the two unaccounted for, we could guess logically, suppose. This would be where Pastor Christie would say we could presume, not assume, but because we have some sort of information here, we could presume that it's these two people with them. Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." And they said to him, "We'll go with you." And they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Now, what would you do if you were in this position? Peter was a professional fisherman, so he went back to doing the things that he knew how to do. This was where he had first met Jesus. This is what Jesus instructed him that he would do. You will be fishers of men, right? Fishers of men. So he went back to fishing. While he was waiting, we could suppose that he still needed support. His family, he needed to earn some sort of income. So he went back to the work that he had done before. We could see even during a time of duress or stress here, he would try and do something that he was good at, successful at. I might have been a failure as a disciple, but I know how to do this thing. And so he returns back to that. But despite being a fisherman, knowing the sea in that area, going out a perfect time, right? Fishing at night, he catches absolutely nothing. Verse 4, just as the day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, do you have any fish?" And they answered him, "No." Paideia in Greek, children. Lads, you have no fish, have you? Is what one translation says, lads. The only occasion where Jesus used this word in reference to his disciples. And it says that we're to understand that him calling him this word, children, lads. We would say it as boys. Boys, come on. When you guys watch a sports team, your favorite sports team, I know sometimes we refer to our teams as our boys, right? And it's because they're a group of men who are brought together, but they're being coached, right? And they're out there trying their best, giving their best effort. Whenever I get frustrated with my team, I'll say, "Come on, boys. Come on." You know, it's that encouragement. You can do better. You think about that term even in baseball. What do we call baseball players? What are they known as that fitting in with this theme of boys or children? Baseball players are known as boys of what? Yeah, boys of summer. Who said boys of summer? Okay, good. Yeah, boys of summer, right? And this is kind of that same heartfelt and that same kind of coaching cry that Jesus is using. Come on, lads. Come on, boys. What are you guys doing? Have you caught anything? Verse 6, he said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you'll find some." And so they argued with him, and they said, "What do you know about fishing? Why would you holler at us from the shore? You've just been watching us, right? What do you know about fishing?" That's what they said, right? What did they do? They did it, right? There's no account of hemming or hawing here. There's no arguing, chirping at one another. Really? You're going to tell me how to do my job? I've been doing this since I've been this tall, right? So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. How many guys are trying to haul this haul in? 7, right? 7 men are trying to pull this net up. Here's a miracle. God is supplying for them. Not able to draw, so you can see that they're struggling with this. We get an account in Luke where the same thing happens early on in their ministry when Jesus is first calling to the disciples. But we see as they're pulling in the haul, their nets are breaking, right? Their nets are breaking in that moment. But here it makes mention that the net isn't breaking. Just pausing and looking a little bit at some of the miracles that happen, that they're experiencing. Because you got to understand that Jesus is doing things now that he's hearkening back to the memories that the disciples have had with him, right? He's trying to do things that are familiar for them. What other things has he done that brings familiarity of recognition to the people he's interacting with? Can you think of anything else he's done as he's been showing himself to his followers? Think about the guys on the road to Emmaus. It's not in the Bible study that they recognize him. In what moment is it that they recognize who he is? Breaking bread, right? In that one act. Now, back at the tomb, when he's being mistaken for a gardener, what did he have to do? What's that? He said her name. He said Mary, right? And she knew the way that he said. And the way it was written, she wasn't looking at him. She simply heard, and she knew at that moment, right? And so he's hearkening back. He's trying to help them remember. I like some of these first and last miracles. If you start looking at them and you're comparing it, and it's just kind of symbolically, or some of those patterns that you can see. Here it was on the third day in Cana for the wedding feast. Here it was the third time that he appeared to them. That's not a huge one necessarily, other than sharing that same number. In Cana, there was no wine. We find for the disciples, there's no fish for them until Jesus commands. And then he tells them what to do. In Cana at the wedding feast, he says, fill the pots. And they fill the pots and obey him, and the miracle occurs. And then he tells them here, cast the nets. In Cana at the wedding, the water pots are filled to the brim. And here we see with this haul with the fish, the nets are full. They can't even, 7 men can't even haul them in. Verse 7, that disciple whom Jesus loved, therefore said to Peter, it is the Lord. And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and he threw himself into the sea. So that Greek word gumnos, it literally means naked, but we realize that he is just stripped down to do work here. It's also the same description we get for John the Baptist as he's doing his baptismal work as well. And so he put on his fisherman's coat. This word that they use for coat, for some reason, it's interesting, but when something is mentioned for the first time and the first and only time, it kind of stands out to you. That at this time, he puts on his coat. He puts on his coat to do what? To meet Jesus? Yeah, to jump into the water, right? That's kind of odd, isn't it? A little bit. Let me put on my jacket so I can jump in the water. Maybe a little bit? Okay. What's that? All the more reason, Amy. I want to just reach you and give you a hug. Give me a second to put on, so I can put on my trench coat so I can give you a proper hug, right? Okay. Tell me, Jim, what do you mean by that? Hold on, we need the microphone. Yes, this is Peter. Okay. So Jim is saying it could be another occurrence for Peter having I'm going to just jump out into the water moment, right? And so maybe by putting on his jacket, maybe there was a thought that he believed, maybe I won't sink, right? Yeah, definitely. I mean, we need to bear that in mind because this is the same person, right? So he has memories of this. Okay. Yeah, okay. So Pastor Melody is saying that his last, so she's musing that the last interaction that Peter had, the last moment that he had was denial. He followed him all the way up to Caiaphas' house, right? And he waited outside. And there he sat around something, right? What did he sit around when he was waiting? A fire. I think it calls it a coal of fires, right? Yeah? Okay. So that was his last moment with Jesus, being separated from him. And now in this joining, this is a time. Now, I would say Pastor Melody could be onto something, because in those days, another name for a coat or a jacket that you would put on, we need to remember that these are symbolic, right? And you would get accounts of these coats or jackets, these working kind of uniforms that people would wear, especially prophets, and they'd call them mantles. And these mantles, these coats, were very important to people because they were symbolic and represented station and who they were. In fact, when you look back on Elijah's, he actually handed his down to his protege, right? Elisha received his mantle and wore it. And these things are seen as having, even sometimes they almost become idols, where people start thinking of them reverently, like they carry power. They're able to do things. If you think about it in the book of Acts, when you see that people are stealing the Apostle Paul's work apron because they think that because he's worn it's got to be imbued with some sort of divine ability or power, right? And so every time he takes off his apron and he goes to do something else, he's constantly afraid, is my apron going to be there, or is somebody going to run off with it? Okay, that's a good musing though. I like that. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards off. When they got out on land, they saw what? A charcoal fire with fish laid out on it and bread. And Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." Interesting, we're getting loaves and fishes again, right? Potentially several miracles are happening here. We're going to get into it. Peter is given miraculous strength to draw up a net that 7 men together were not able to draw. The fact that the net itself did not break is also something to note. And then this fire of coals and the breakfast that they're eating here. Where did this come from? I think all we're saying here is that potentially miracle upon miracle may be happening right now that we're seeing, okay? Just there's that potential there. This entire scene is designed, though, to hearken and awaken Peter's mind to the first time that he met Jesus, reminding him of those first interactions when everything seemed like it was new and it was perfect before he failed. And so even this idea of the fire of coals could potentially be taking him back and playing in his mind. Oh my goodness, I'm revisiting this scene right now of when I was last around a fire in his denial. We'll keep moving on here. Verse 11. So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore full of large fish. Again, let's pay attention to that, because how many people were just trying to do this and couldn't do it? 7. Peter was one of them. But all of a sudden now, he's hauling the net by himself. 153 of them. Okay, this is where we could go in the weeds, and we're going to hit this kind of quickly. But let's look at this. First, we're just noting Isaiah 40. we should know this. It says, starting in verse 29 through 31, he gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might he increases strength. Even youths shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength, and they shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Is this the strength that Peter is now showing? Is he becoming somebody else now? Why the 153 fish? Okay, so we have some fathers of the church. We have Cyril of Alexander, we have Jerome of Clement, Augustine, and they all have kind of ideas of why this number. At the end of the day, this number, it's not a make it or break it in our faith, right? It's not one of those things that if you don't agree with this or if you do agree with it, it doesn't really matter in the end upon your salvation and your faith. But I think this is one more kind of piece that is God trying to tell us something here? And if so, what is he trying to tell us in this 153 number? I'm going to go down to Jerome's because Jerome's is the easiest. Jerome believed that there were 153 kinds of fish in the sea. And so is this symbolic, he would say, of representing Jesus gathering all nations unto himself? Okay? That's a good one. I don't know how scientifically accurate that would be, 153 fish. I mean, surely there's got to be more. We get Cyril of Alexander, and what he does is he takes each one of those numbers as a representative digit of that amount. 153, so the 1 would represent 100. Starting with the 53, the 5 would represent the number 50, and then in the single digit number place would be 3. So when you look at 100, we think potentially could equal the number of the fullness represented of the Gentiles. This is, and you see in Matthew 18:12, talking about the 100 sheep and if one of them should go astray, right? 50 is the remnant of Israel in the Bible. The number 50 symbolizes their liberation and restoration. The Holy Spirit, why does it represent the Holy Spirit? 50. What's that? 50 days after right? Pentecost. 50 days, right? Was the coming of the Holy Spirit. It also, for the Jew, represented the mark of a full cycle beginning the next cycle. This is often termed as a jubilee. And then 3, is that representative of the Trinity? Well, like I said, some of these we say, okay, that's okay that you would lean that way, but maybe not necessarily. Augustine kind of takes it even further, all right? And so he says, well, 10 is the number of the law. Again, he's taking that in the tens place is that 1 there representing 10, and then in the single digit place it's a 7, a 10 and a 7. 7 is the number of grace. And then he comes up with this formula. If you were to add these numbers up, and he goes in order, and you can see, I put the diagram because when you talk about doing a sum of 1 to 17, for a non-mathematical mind like mine, when you say, what is the sum of 1 to 17? Not 1 and 17. That's easy. That's 18, right? 1 plus 17. But what is the sum from 1 to 17? If you were to add as you go. And so this is what it looks like as a diagram. You first add the 1 to the 2. And then from that, you take that number, which is now 3, and you add that to the next line, which is 3. So now you're at 6, right? And on and on and on. That number would come to 153. For Augustine, he thought potentially this number could represent the law and grace working together, the whole sum of law and grace. Okay? Again, these are interesting notions and ideas, but these are notions and ideas at the end of the day. Suppositions. The net. What is the net? I had this conversation just probably 2 weeks ago with a group of guys. We knew that the net represented something. What is it representing here? Is this a type or symbolic of the church? The fact that it's noted as being not broken, right? And you could see that Greek word there, iskathi, which is a form of the word schizo, which we get the word schism. What else do we know that Greek word schizo from? What's that? Schizophrenia, right? Which is brokenness. What happens to the nets when they first meet Jesus? What state is the net in when they're pulling up that haul? It's breaking, right? And then what is the state of the net in this haul? It's holding together. It's unbroken. Is this symbolic of the state of the church? What was the state of that church when Jesus first met the disciples? What would have been their church? It would have been synagogue, right? And their form of religion, and it was a broken form of religion. But now, with these men starting, with Peter being the father of the church, is this perhaps symbolic of the new church, that it's unbroken? It's not a divided, it's not a broken church. Okay, let's keep moving. Verse 12, Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. That makes us pause a little bit, right? Why does it say now none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" What does that indicate for us? If none of them dared to do it. They knew it was the Lord, but why would they even be tempted to say, "Who are you?" Because maybe he didn't look the same, right? Because he's familiar, yet he's unfamiliar to them, okay? They want to say, "You don't look the same," right? But they know it is you. Whether you seem unfamiliar to us or not, we know it's you. Both here and in Luke 5, we see that Jesus' miracle is followed by a commission to Peter. And then it's also interesting here, I think, as we look at this, there's a note here, and this is Luke 22, verses 31 through 32. In there, Jesus says, "Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demanded to have you, that he might sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers." All right. We know that this isn't the first time that he's appeared to Peter. There's other accounts where it says that he had also appeared to Peter. We'll move on. The fire of coals, that's symbolically calling us back again. This is a very Peter-centric portion of Scripture that we're reading here. So here come the first of three questions that Jesus asked to Peter. And what we're seeing here is a commissioning, or some would even say a recommissioning or a reinstating of Peter. Okay? How many opportunities did Peter take to deny Jesus? 3. 3 times he denies him, right? So how many times do you think he's going to be asked into commission? 3. It's almost as if Jesus is countering each one of those denials, right? Don't carry a single one of them with you, because now you're erasing them right here in this moment. Verse 13, Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, so with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples. Again, that word can mean manifested, understood, after he was raised from the dead. In verse 15, when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John. What does Jesus not call him in this moment? He says, Simon, son of John. What could he have also called him? What name could he have called him? Peter, Cephas, right? Rocky. He doesn't call him Peter. He doesn't call him Cephas here. He says Simon. Why do we think that Jesus went with those words? Could there be any reasons why he doesn't use the new name on Peter that he gave to Peter at one time? Maybe Peter wouldn't feel worthy to have his master call him that name again? Maybe, yeah. Okay, why else do we think maybe? These are just ideas. We're just kind of pulling ideas here. None of them are wrong. I think you got it, Bob. I think we're looking at, this is his starting name, right? This was his original name. This is his given name. This is what his name was when he met Jesus. And he was first meeting Jesus. And it's almost as if in this moment, Jesus is reinforcing, let's start over, right? Let's start over. Now, I think when I kind of think about that, and my brain says, okay, Jesus is going to take 3 times to not call him Peter, to not call him Cephas, and he's going to use this name, Simon, son of John, or in some translations, son of Jonas. And he's almost resetting their meeting again, right? You guys know we were in a terrible car accident 5 years ago. Almost in June, we'll hit our 5-year anniversary. We were driving down a Wyoming highway. It was an 80-mile-an-hour speed limit. It started to rain. I dropped the speed immediately down 10 miles, and we were doing fine. Roads were great. We came up a hill, and just before that, a big black dually truck just hauled by me on the left-hand side. I was in the slow side, and I immediately told Charla, I'm not doing that. That guy's crazy. I said, we're not doing that. We come up this hill, and the road looks like just a polished sheet of glass. It was all water. And we hit it at 70 miles an hour. And I had enough time as I was trying to get control of our little Jeep Cherokee where I could feel us drifting back into that left lane. Now, the way the highway was set up, it was 2 lanes headed in one direction. The other oncoming lane was actually a totally separated highway, but there was a big ravine, a 200-foot embankment that kind of V'd down into it. And so as our car started kind of pulling over to the left side, we started spinning, and I could not get control of it. I have been driving in winter weather since I was 15 years old. Actually, earlier than that. My mom let me drive our station wagon, honestly, when I was 13 years old. In Philadelphia, she let me drive around the neighborhood. This was the 80s and 90s, right? And so I know what it's like to drive on snow and ice. And I was completely out of control. No tapping on brakes, no counter steering, nothing was working. I was driving a rudderless boat. And we came to the edge, and I had enough time and enough wherewithal to turn to Charlotte and tell her, we're going over. We're going over this embankment. That was my last memory. Sorry. Immediately what happened, what I didn't know, is when we hit that embankment, our left tires caught it and flipped our Jeep over and took us down the embankment. And as soon as that happened, I believe my side airbags went off on my side. And as soon as they went, I lost consciousness. It hit me in a way. All I know is we rolled 3 times, and I was out on the first roll. I have no memory. My next memory is rescue people climbing on top of our Jeep to try and deal with the windshield. And then when I came to, so Charla stayed awake the whole time. She didn't pass out at all. I came to and I realized, okay, I don't feel right. That was my initial reaction. Later on in the hospital, they're like, okay, here's what happened. You broke 6 ribs in your back. It shattered your spleen. It collapsed your left lung. You were coughing up and breathing on blood. Charla had to open your airway so that you wouldn't die because you were making, and then I was making clicking sounds, which are indicative of a brain injury. I had 2 brain bleeds. Charla stayed awake the whole time. I recovered within 2 months. Within 2 months, I was back to work. I started working at Focus on the Family 2 months after this car accident. I had a miracle surgery. They plated my ribs in the back with titanium, and hours after the surgery, I was able to twist and move around, and really it was just my brain. That was the big issue. I say all that. I passed out, and for me, it's like I hear a story of that accident. But for Charla, she lived it. I remember months after that, we went and saw a movie, The Batman, with Robert Pattinson. And in there's this car chase scene, and the audio is turned up really loud in the theater, and there's a point where the Batmobile or a car is skidding, and you can hear the sounds of the tires and just the crunching of the vehicle as it crashes. And that was like too much. It was too real for Charla, and she was freaking out. She grabbed my hand. She was like breaking my fingers. And what she had to do is she had to go through this thing. She met with a Christian counselor, and he took her through this process called EMDR, right? And EMDR, it's a distraction technique where you follow a light, and sometimes they put it on a light bar, and it goes back and forth, kind of like the Knight Rider light on Kit, right? Back and forth, and you track it the whole time as that counselor takes you through something traumatic. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to help you set context of that traumatic thing in your brain and teach you that you're not living in that trauma anymore and that you're free of that you can minimize it. I say all of that story right now because I almost think that same technique is what Jesus is using with Peter. He's saying, let's revisit that moment. You sitting by that fire of coals. You in your lowest point, when you have denied me and betrayed me, you abandoned me and left me to this horrible death, and you could think that it's all your fault. Because you know Peter was very grandiose, right? He believed a lot of things. Do you think or do you suppose that maybe he thought that if he had been with Jesus, that he could have somehow prevented this from happening? That maybe because he abandoned Jesus, that this was his fault? Is that where maybe your mind would go if you were in that same position? If I would have done anything any differently, would this not have happened to this person that I love? Right? And Jesus is taking him back, and he's reminding him of all of those situations. Remember your denial, but also remember this. Remember when I first called you. When I first called you, we were so new with each other, I didn't call you by your nickname. I didn't call you Rocky. I called you Simon. And that's what he says here. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, and this is Peter saying it, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. Again, Simon. It's interesting to know, do you love me? Yes, you know that I love you. Jesus is saying agapeo, right? Agapeo, agape. He's saying that fatherly divine love. Peter's not referring back to that same love when he says, yes, I love you. He says phileo, brotherly love. Jesus, I fatherly love you. Do you fatherly love me? Peter, I brotherly love you, is how he's responding. Feed my sheep. Feed my lambs, Bosque. This word feed doesn't just mean one time, right? Go out and feed the dog. Okay, I did it. I fed the dog. I'm done. This word means continue, keep feeding. Continually feed. Be responsible for the feeding of my lambs. The second question, verse 16, and he said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, tend my sheep. Again, the agape and the phileo, agapeo, phileo. He's telling him here, tend. The word he's using, poimono, is shepherd. Shepherd my probaton. These are more mature. These aren't little lambs. Shepherd the mature. So what does he tell him to do to the young lambs? Feed them. Now what is he telling him to do? Now that they're more mature, what is he being told to do? Tend to them, shepherd them, right? Okay. So things are changing here. There's a progression. The third question, verse 17. And he said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was grieved because he said this to him the third time. And that word grieved, it means in pain. And actually that word is connected to the same word as being able to describe somebody struggling with childbirth, okay? Is that fair to say? I don't know. Can a guy ever say, I was grieving so much, it was like when you gave birth to a child, right? Okay. But we know the depth of this grief that Peter is feeling right now. Do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. You know, 2 words for knowledge. Peter uses both. Gynegoskine, to acquire knowledge, to learn by experience, and edonai, to possess innate knowledge about something. Lord, you know, edonai, all things by your nature. You know, gynoskine, by your experience that I am fond of you. Feed my sheep. Feed my mature sheep. All right, so keep on feeding my little lambs. Keep on shepherding my sheep. Keep on feeding my sheep. And this is the exhortation given to all the elders in the book of Acts. Feed my sheep. Peter later gives the same challenge to other pastors. 1 Peter 5:2. We see him in this mode, leading the sheep, trying to feed them into maturity. We see this all throughout in Acts 1 through 10. You can see him doing this at Cornelius' house. And then when he has this Gentile controversy with Paul, in Acts 10 through 15, we see that. And then later you can sense his shepherd's heart as it's still being shared with us in his letters, 1st and 2nd Peter. Verse 18, truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself, walk wherever you wanted, but when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. By the time John recorded this word, Peter had already been crucified. He'd already been martyred and died. All right? And we know that his form of crucifixion was not the same. He felt that he wasn't fit to die the same way as his Savior, as his Lord and Master, his Rabbi. And so he instructed them to crucify him upside down. By the time John wrote this, Peter was already gone. Okay? Worth noting. Verse 19. This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, "Follow me." Jesus and the beloved apostle. Verse 20, Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved. You kind of get a sense here that John really wants you to get this point, right? I am Jesus's favorite. He may be spending all this time, and let's talk about this special relationship to Peter, but don't forget this. I'm actually the guy who's like this with him. We're buds, okay? We're closest friends. And so Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who also had leaned back against him during the supper and had said, "Lord, who is it that's going to betray you?" When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, "Lord, what about this man?" What is Peter asking here in this moment by saying something like that? What about this man? What do you think he's trying to imply here? Okay. There's definitely some sort of competition or comparison happening here, right? Tell me about him. Okay, what else? Anything else? There are no bad responses. These are all just kind of brainstorming. What do you think? He could divert the attention, right? Yeah. Yeah. If this is the role you're asking me and you're putting all this responsibility about your sheep, right? What about him? Because you're really close to this guy. It's just a reminder. He tells Peter, "Follow me. You follow me." And I think we should kind of take this kind of mentality about it. That when Jesus calls you, and when he calls you by name, when he says, "Joshua, come follow me," he's not saying to you when he calls you, "Look at everybody else and come with the crowd." He's saying, "You follow me." And I think in a way he's telling us, follow me in the way that you need to follow me, which is very different from everybody else. My faith and the way that I follow and love Jesus looks very different from my wife's. We grew up very differently. Our expressions of faith are very different. Our heart songs and the things that we love, the way that we connect to Jesus, look very, very different from each other. Maybe not so radically different. That would be her dad and I. Her dad and I are two different creatures. One of us is a wolf and the other one of us is a house cat. And I'll let you guys figure out which one of those categories I belong in. But follow me, he says to Peter. No Christian should keep his eyes on another Christian, but should always look to Jesus. Hebrews 12, verses 1 through 2. Jesus deals with us individually. But we're kind of getting a glimpse right now because Peter is calling out this inner circle, right? So who is in this inner circle for Jesus? Who are people who make up this inner circle? Come on, you guys know. Okay, Peter and Andrew. Yeah? And if you include James, and this is James the greater, not James the lesser. James Zebedee, right? And who's always with James? Sons of Zebedee. James and John. Peter and Andrew, right? And James and John. Two sets of brothers, right? But usually you get Peter, James, and John. And then if you had to narrow it down within that inner circle, then there's two that are really close to Jesus and that are really in the inner circle of the inner circle even more. And it's Peter and John, right? And then John makes sure that you know that even within the inner circle of these two people, I'm the favorite. right? Just humbly, I put that out there for you. We see this inner circle. They're at Jairus' daughters, her healing, the transfiguration, her healing, her raising from the dead. The Olivet Discourse. In that case, they do have Andrew is there, because this is technically like two sets of brothers when you include Andrew. The withdrawal at Gethsemane, the inner circle is there. And then you see that Peter and John are even more closely related to each other, or are closely related to Christ. They're there when the Passover is prepared. They're next to each other at the Lord's table. When Mary runs, she tells Peter and John about the empty tomb. And then also after at Pentecost, the inner circle, Peter and John. So it makes sense to us that Peter is asking about John. What about him? Verse 22, Jesus' response. Jesus said, "If it is my will that he remain until I come, what is it to you? You follow me." So the saying spread abroad among the brothers that this disciple was not to die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he was not to die. But if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? It's interesting. We're just about to hit that 1 year mark here with Pierpont, where we were slowly getting ready. Everything was gearing up. And as we looked to May was our big, this is our big wedding celebration, and 25 years being married. We went to Scotland. And while we were there, we went to the town of St. Andrew. Why am I saying this? Totally got that wrong. We're in St. Andrew, which is a great college town. But it was neat because at a ruinous cathedral, which is just a cathedral in ruins, this cathedral was known for housing the bones of Andrew, the apostle. And I think it's interesting that these bones are still around and kind of still make it from place to place, and everybody has a claim. Look at this femur. This femur is Peter's femur. It's just, it's amazing. John, if he was not to die, we need to know that we do not have an account of him being martyred. Okay? I'll just say that. There's no account. Everybody else, there's an account of how they died in martyrdom, except for John. Is this prophetic? Peter, he represents the first century, the starting of the church. And that first century is connected with martyrdom, people dying for the faith. But John, when we think of John, how can we not help but go to the book of Revelation and look at the last century of all history and humanity? Is Peter the beginning, and John represents the end? One a martyr, the other a revelator. Verse 24, this is the disciple who is bearing witness about these things, John talking about himself, and who has written these things, and we know that his testimony is true. Now there are also many other things that Jesus did, were every one of them to be written. I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. Think about that statement, right? The world itself could not contain the books that would be written. This keeps going. Here's where we pick on John Sisler. Why wasn't Jesus recognized? No, I'm joking, John. We're not picking on you. It's just in the commentary material. They keep harping on this. Why isn't Jesus recognized? Why isn't he recognized? But I would say this, you guys really do pick on Deanne and talk to her about this study and have her point you in the direction where she went to see why is it such a big deal for us as Christians to understand that potentially Jesus remained marred, pierced, right? Why do the holes still remain? Okay, we'll keep going. You'll see here on page 11, it's basically it's still going, it's harping it on this, that Jesus is forever changed. And then as we look at a review of John, you can see that in pages 11, Unit 1, chapters 1 through 2. We look at John introducing Jesus as the pre-existent one and his calling, and then him showing all of his signs. And then Unit 2 starts with chapter 12, and this looks at the final week of Jesus. And that goes all the way through into his resurrection and his resurrection appearances. Now, Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in these books, in this book. But these are written, so what? So that you may believe. That is, you as in your name. That you, Deanne, may believe. That you, Bob, Kathy, that you may believe. These are written here. All right, you guys, we've done it. That is John in the books. Now, my next step is, this hasn't gone beyond my forgetting. It just keeps getting backburned, but I'm doing this. I will get this done. I need to submit the artwork that we have to make our pins for completion of this book. So all of you who have stuck with us will know that that's coming. We'll receive that as we go through Joshua, that this will be coming our way, okay? Joshua, I don't know if you guys know, but we're making little, we have lanyards, right? Pierpont lanyards, but we're making little books of the Bible pins to basically celebrate a completion of a book, and for everybody who participated in that book study, whether you had knee surgery or not and could make all of them, Richard. But no, Richard was here. Richard was, he was devout. He kept watching, and yeah. Let's close in prayer, you guys. Let's close in prayer and dismiss, and then I would love if you guys wanted to just talk about this study and spend a little bit of time. Let's spend a little time talking about it, but technically we're dismissed, okay? All right. Can I get somebody just lovely and wonderful to close us in prayer? What's that? All right, let's do that, Dick. Charla, will you close us in prayer? I was going to go with somebody else, but thank you, Dick. You're right.